Hello everyone, my name is Matthias and I would like to welcome you all to our webinar today. In a few minutes I will be extending my colleague Edgar Grasel a warm welcome. He has prepared the topic Remote and Distributed Work with ELO for you today. A little more information for you before we start. You will be muted during the webinar but are welcome to ask questions about your GoToWebinar in the questions box at any time. After the webinar, we will take the time to answer them. You hardly need to take notes as you will receive the training materials soon. You can look forward to an interesting presentation. Welcome, Edgar. I hand over to you now.
Thank you and welcome from my side as well. My name is Edgar and I will show you today how you can work remotely and distributed with ELO. So, which topics will we cover? First of all, we'll have a look what is remote and distributed work. Then we'll have to face some challenges when it comes to remote and distributed work, which we will have a look on it as well. Then I'll show you how ELO can help with remote and distributed work, how you can access your repository from remote locations, and how you can synchronize your repository when it comes to really remote locations. Then we'll have a look at what you need for remote and distributed work with ELO. And in the end, we will have the time for some questions and answers. And if you have any question during the webinar, just type it in your questions box and we will answer them in the end. So let's have a look on remote and distributed work. What is the difference? What is remote and distributed work? So normally when we're working in the same location, in the same building, in the same company, then we have some benefits. We have the possibility of direct communication. We meet someone at the coffee machine or well, I go to the office of my colleague and then I can communicate with him or her. We have short ways and we have the same infrastructure. We don't have to face some technological issues most of the time. So it works. We have access to the same applications, to the same information on the same infrastructure. That's good when we're working in the same location. But what if we're not working in the same location, but for the same company distributed around the world? So we have a headquarters somewhere, and then we have some subsidiaries in, let's say, South Africa, India, and so on. So there are some issues, there are some challenges when it comes to distributed work around the world. We have long communication lines. For example, we have a subsidiary in Australia. Communication takes very long because they're in a complete different time zone. And in the subsidiary around the world, you have a local infrastructure. And on top of that, half of us, 52% of us is working from home at least once every week. So this is remote work in a distributed location. And for this, we have to face some challenges with remote and distributed work. So different locations around the world. And when it comes to connections to the headquarters, for example, from, in this case, India to, I think it's Sweden or something, then you can have some issues with your internet connection because it doesn't go direct way, it goes somewhere around the world, and it may be a poor connection. And that's what you need for distributed locations around the world. Do we have a safe and stable connection? to our subsidiary. Next thing is, do we have the same information? Do we have access to the same information? And can we collaborate in a way which is suitable for everyone? And there was a survey some years ago on challenges with remote and distributed work. Some people were asked, what are the most important challenges when it comes to distributed work? And 83% of them said they are disconnected from the workplace culture because they sit on the other half of the world. They sit on the opposite side of the world or something. So they're really disconnected from the workplace culture. 82% said they have some communication obstacles. 73% said they have information imbalances. It's clear because in my headquarters I have the information, but in the subsidiary on the other side of the world, they don't have those information because they don't have access to it. And 72% said they have some technological challenges when it comes to poor internet connection or when we don't have the same infrastructure or whatever. So those are the top 4 challenges when it comes to distributed work around the world. So how can ELO help here? Well, first of all, we have the ELO ECM suite. That's your digital core, where you file your documents, your information, where you can collaborate with each other, where you can use workflows, where you can make some analytics of your data, information, and documents which are filed in the repository. And as long as we sit in the same location, well, we can do it like this. We can work together in the same, with the same data, with the same information, with the same documents. But what if somebody's not in the same location, or when we are distributed around the world? Well, there are 2 ways. First of all, when it comes to a remote location, for example, when you're sitting in the home office, then there is a way of accessing your repository from your home office, from your remote location. So, same example, we have a company, we have some teams, they access the same repository in the ELO ECM suite. And then we have a remote location. Let's say it's a subsidiary in France and we sit in Germany or something. How can they access our information? We have a good internet connection with a stable internet connection. So the only thing what they need is a secure connection to the repository, and then they can access the repository with their own client. So that's the easy way. That's just the infrastructure topic. You need to provide a VPN connection for this. That's the way how I'm working because I'm sitting in the home office the whole time. So I have a VPN connection and I can access the repository in our headquarters. But what if you don't have a stable internet connection? Then there's another way. Then you can synchronize your repository from distributed locations or to distributed locations as well. So let's say we have some distributed locations around the world, and we want to have the same information in some parts of our repository. Then we can do the following. We can connect the distributed locations to our headquarters, or we can connect the distributed locations with each other, and then we can synchronize those informations in a dedicated time slot. Let's say in the evening, we can synchronize those information, the documents, and so on, which are filed in those remote and distributed locations. So what do you need for this? First of all, you need the ELO ECM suite. That's the software for enterprise content management, where you can manage your users and groups. It's a platform for secure digital filing. You can do process automation with workflows, and you can get things done faster with automated tasks. And that's the thing what we will do, an automated task. So when we look back on our distributed locations around the world, then we have some challenges. So let's say we have a central repository on top, which is in, I think, Sweden. Then we have a local repository in India, and then we have a local repository in South Africa, and then we have a subsidiary in France as well. The subsidiary in France, well, they have a strong internet connection, they have a stable internet connection. They can access the central repository directly through a VPN connection, through a secure connection. That's not the thing, that's not the challenge on this. The challenge are those two locations. How can we connect them to our central repository so that we can access information from the local repository and they get information and documents from the central repository? When we want to connect them, then we have to add something to our ELO ECM suite. So we have our local and central repositories, and then we need the ELO replication for this. And the ELO replication does replicate information and documents from the central repository to the local repository and the other way around. So from the local repository to the central repository. We can replicate the whole repository or just parts of it. And this can be done with automated tasks during a defined time slot, and then the information gets replicated. So for example, a customer, or we have a customer, they sit in Austria, I think, yes, and they have a subsidiary in China. They don't have a stable internet connection, so they use ELO replication to provide information from the central repository to the subsidiary and to get information from the local repository in the headquarter in the central repository. And this is done overnight, so when it's night in China, I think, then they replicate those information to the central repository, which takes hours because they have such a poor internet connection, but it works. So that's how you can access or replicate information from your subsidiaries to the headquarters, to the central repository. And this would look like what we can see here. So that's our central repository. We have some folders in here. We have some information in here. And we have one local repository from, let's say this is the German repository, which would look like this in the subsidiary. So they have their own folder structure. They have their own documents in here. And it looks like this in the subsidiary, but in our central repository, it's just part of our, well, central repository. And the other way around, or not the other way around, another subsidiary would look like this. That's Contilo Corp. Let's say they sit in the US, and they have their own folder structure as well, and which would look like this in the subsidiary, but we have everything in our central repository. So what you need for remote and distributed work with ELO is an ELO ECM suite, ELO replication, and an ELO business partner, which helps you to install and customize the solution so that you can use it in your distributed locations. So We can make it with secure access when we have a stable internet connection. When we don't have a stable internet connection, then we have to use ELO replication to replicate parts of the repository to our central repository or to the local repository on the other side of the world. We don't have any information imbalance anymore because every subsidiary, every local repository has the same information as the central repository. So there is no information imbalance anymore. We can do worldwide collaboration because we can even work with the other side of the world because they have access to the same information as we have. We can replicate the information and documents automatically overnight or in a dedicated time slot. So every hour or something, you can do whatever you want. We have one global repository. Well, with a central repository, we can build a global repository with replication. And we have improved communication around the world. So that's it, remote and distributed work with ELO. And now it's time for your questions. No questions so far, so I don't have to provide some answers. You can type in your questions in your question box right now. And if you don't have any question, then, well, I say thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Edgar, for this interesting presentation. I would like to draw your attention to our upcoming webinars. You can register via the following link on the website elo.com/webseminar. You have the possibility to register until 1 hour before the webinar starts. Thanks again to all attendees. I wish you all the best and see you soon.